Internal Revenue Service IRS Tax News. Tax Time Guide. Select a tax return preparer with care. IR 2021-45, February 25th, 2021, Washington. The Internal Revenue Service today reminded taxpayers to choose a tax return preparer with care. Even though the vast majority of tax return preparers provide honest, quality service, some cause great harm through fraud, identity theft, and other scams every year. So when you're thinking about your tax preparation, you got basically two things that you're keeping in mind to get the taxes done. One, you want to get them done, and you want to basically get the refund as soon as possible. That's probably the first thing in people's mind. And then two, if you have a more complex return, or especially when you have a more complex return, you want to make the system easier so that you have planning in the future, and it'll be easier next year to basically do the same type of thing. If you have an easier tax return that you are going to be doing, easier typically meaning that your AGI or adjusted gross income, your income level is below a certain threshold, and possibly you don't itemize, you're just taking the standard deduction. Possibly you don't have something like a Schedule C type of business or something like that. If you do, you could still do the tax return yourself, but it does add a level of complexity to it if you have a Schedule C sole proprietor business type of income, as many more people probably do in 2020 than in prior years. Then, if you have a simplified return, you might want to try to just get the tax software, which you might be able to get for free on the IRS website, or at least starting at the IRS website, and then go into the third-party proprietary software. The software can be very beneficial because it will allow you to go through an interview process, which will help you with the data input, and for a basic return, that's probably sufficient for you to get everything that you need to be into the system. And then if your return is going to be more complex, then, and that might be some of those items, you have some of those items, a higher AGI, you have a business or something like that, you might want a tax professional at that point. When you're looking for a tax professional, that means that you're probably looking for someone not just to get the immediate tax return done in the current year and get the refund as soon as possible, but you're looking for someone that can help you with tax planning out into the future. So you're looking for someone who's going to be an honest person there, of course, so that if the IRS comes back, you have the support going back, you have long-term planning, you're able to go to the same person in the following year. If you have any kind of carryover stuff that needs to go from one year to the other, then they can help you out with that kind of stuff. So you want to avoid then, if looking for a tax preparer, just kind of focusing on the first thing, a big refund as fast as possible, because that's not really what you want when you're looking for a tax preparer, because although you want to get things done quickly now, you're typically looking for someone that you can have a longer term relationship with. Okay, so people value good tax return preparers for helping them through a complex tax situation, or for being available when they don't have time to prepare their own tax return. Paid tax return preparers complete more than half of the tax returns submitted to the IRS in tax year 2018. It's very important to select the right tax professional. After all, people trust them with their most sensitive personal information. No matter who prepares it, the accuracy of the tax return is ultimately the responsibility of the taxpayer. And that's going to be important to note, because a lot of times when you get a tax preparer, the feeling is that, well, I'm not the professional, they're the professional, they're filling out the tax return, whatever they do, it's fine because they're the one that's doing it. That's not the way the IRS sees it. The IRS sees it as you are the one responsible. Even though you're not a tax professional, you're hiring a tax professional as an agent, and although their name goes on the return, or should, as a tax preparer, you are the one that primarily is responsible, and the IRS, when coming back with questions, will come back to you, and they could do so just in terms of a normal kind of audit in the normal statute of limitations, which is like 3 years, and they could come back later than that. So you want to make sure that it's accurate to the best of your ability, so that if there is a problem in the next 3 years, that you go back and look at it or something like that, or possibly even longer, that you can kind of understand and correspond with the IRS if they have an issue with it. So the IRS protects taxpayers by assessing significant civil penalties against dishonest return preparers and working with the Justice Department to end scams and prosecute the criminals behind them. What to look for. The Choosing a Tax Professional. There's a link to that page here on irs.gov. Has information about tax return preparers, credentials, and qualifications. There's a links to the credentials and qualifications. The IRS Directory of Federal Tax Return Preparers with credentials and selected qualifications, link to that here, can help identify many preparers by type of credential or qualification. So one of the things that helps the tax profession to be more honest is the credentials and the qualifications. So you can look into those. Note that the credentials and qualifications you're looking for may differ on your particular needs as to what you need the tax preparation for. So in other words, you might be hiring like a CPA firm, or you might be hiring an enrolled agent, or you might be hiring possibly even a lawyer. But when you're thinking about tax preparation needs, you're probably thinking more like an enrolled agent or a CPA firm. If you just need individual taxes and there's not a business element to it, you don't have a sole proprietorship or other business information rolling into it, then an enrolled agent might be a cheaper way to go because they're specialized on the taxes, possibly more on the individual taxes. If you have more accounting needs, help with bookkeeping for like a business, Schedule C, or other business, an accountant, a CPA might be good because they have a broader, their credential kind of might be broader for things like accounting type of stuff that could be useful for business returns. And then if you have a special need and a special niche or something like that, where you have particular legal needs, then a lawyer might be good to like sort through the legalese on a technical type of issue. And so that might be one way you kind of sort things out. So by law, anyone who is paid to prepare or assess in preparing most federal tax returns must have a valid preparer tax identification number, or a P10, PTIN. Paid preparers must sign and include their P10 on the return. Not signing a return is a red flag that the paid preparer may be looking to make a quick profit by promoting a big refund or charging fees based on the size of the refund. So that's a big red flag if you talk to a tax preparer that basically says, I get people bigger refunds than other people, and I'm going to basically charge you based on the refund I get you. That's not good. That's a bad incentive, because that incentivizes them to take not good positions, or positions that couldn't be supported, possibly even committing fraud. And if they do that, and especially if they do not sign the tax return, then the suspicion is that when the IRS comes back, they're not going back to the tax preparer, they're going to come back to you. And a lot of times the tax preparer will be gone at that point in time, right? They collected their commission, they got you the big refund, but it's not really helpful because the IRS is going to come back and take it back possibly, or there's a threat to do that. It's not, and so and then when they do, or if they do, the tax preparer possibly could be gone at that time. And you want someone that's going to be there, of course, if there's any need for them, or at least you want to make sure that your tax return is as accurate as possible, so you have peace of mind, so that the IRS doesn't come back to you for the tax return if there's any problem with it. So well-intended taxpayers can be deceived by preparers who don't understand taxes or who mislead people into taking credits for deductions they aren't entitled to claim. Fraudulent preparers often do this to increase their fee. Here are more types to consider. So look for a preparer who is available year-round. In the event questions come up about a tax return, taxpayers may need to contact the preparer after the filing season is over. So note that if someone is not around for a long period of time, they might leave and then they come back, vacation. That kind of makes sense for a tax preparer. But if you're talking about someone who hasn't been in the community for a while or something like that, and they kind of came out of nowhere, then that's not good, because the difference between basically a scam and a legitimate business is often that the scam is there to take short-term profits and leave when they don't provide what they promised, whereas a long-term business is there for the long term, and therefore their long-term reputation is more important to them. So you want to make sure that you're looking for someone who's there long-term and not someone who's just there for a little bit of time and possibly trying to get as much as they can and then leave before anyone realizes that they're not providing the service that they were saying they were. So require whether the tax return preparer has a professional credential, enrolled agent, certified public accountant, or attorney, belongs to the professional organization, or attends continuing education classes. Because tax law can be complex, competent tax return preparers remain up to date on tax topics. The IRS website has more information regarding national tax professional organizations. So you can look at all these kind of the enrolled agent, the certified public accountant, and attorneys. They all have continuing education requirements. Now, their continuing education requirements are different for those different fields. And again, you might choose between those credentials based on what your specialization are. Meaning, an attorney usually doesn't, may not be especially in general tax preparation, but they might have a specialty in a particular area of tax. So usually, an attorney, you might go there for more specialization. Enrolled agents, probably more specialized in individual tax returns, and then the CPA has a broader kind of into accounting type of stuff. So again, if you have debits and credits and accounting needs to help you with, that might be applicable. So check the preparer's history, check the Better Business Bureau website for information about the preparer, look for disciplinary actions and the license status for the credential preparers. For CPAs, check with the State Board of Accountancy. For attorneys, check with the State Bar Association. For enrolled agents, go to the IRS.gov and search for, quote, verify enrolled agent's status, end quote, or check the directory. There's a link to the directory here. Ask about service fees. Avoid preparers who base fees on a percentage of their client's refund or boast bigger refunds than their competition. Don't give tax documents, social security numbers, or other information to a preparer who is, if merely inquiring about their services and fees. So if they're boasting about, I'm going to get you a big refund, that's usually not a good sign. And you don't want to give them personal information just to test out what's going to happen generally as well, because then they could commit fraud. And if they're not a legitimate person, then they could use that information possibly to file fraudulent returns. So unfortunately, some unscrupulous preparers have used this information to improperly file returns without the taxpayer's permission. Provide records and receipts. Good preparers ask to see these documents. They'll also ask questions to determine the client's total income, deductions, tax credits, and other items. Do not hire a preparer who e-files a tax return using a pay stub instead of a Form W-2. This is against IRS e-file rules. Understand preparation rules. Attorneys, CPAs, and enrolled agents can represent any client before the IRS in any situation. Annual filing season program, there's a link to that here. Participants may represent taxpayers in limited situations if they prepare and signed the tax return. So when you're talking about, someone representing you, meaning if you have a question, the IRS audits or something like that, and you want someone else to basically talk to them on your behalf in a similar way as a lawyer might do that in a court case, then typically the attorneys, the CPAs, and enrolled agents can have the capacity to do that. And that will typically be a situation, you're talking about a situation where, they file the tax return and possibly the IRS has a question about it. And then you want someone to address the question, then if you would like someone else to do it, the professional, then they're acting kind of as your agent on that behalf. And then you're typically looking at that point for attorneys, CPAs, and enrolled agents that have the capacity to do that possibly. So never sign a blank or incomplete return. So that's typically a red flag. If someone says, hey, you signed the return, I'm the preparer, I'm not going to sign it. That's not good normally, because the IRS indicates that they don't want their information on the return, or possibly they don't have a proper P10. So review the tax return before signing. Be sure to ask questions if something is not clear or appears inaccurate. Any refund should go directly to the taxpayer, not into the preparer's bank account. Reviewing the routing and bank account number on the completed returns is always a good idea. So you want to make sure the routing number is correct. If the tax preparer says, hey, look, I'm going to take my fee out of your refund and try to route it directly into their account, they shouldn't be doing that. That's not a good sign. They should be, you should be paying them not out of the refund directly from the IRS. So report abuse tax preparers to the IRS. Use Form 14157 Complaint Tax Return Preparer. There's a link to that here. If a return preparer is suspected of filing or changing the return without the client's consent, also file Form 14157A Return Preparer Fraud or Misconduct Affidavit. There's a link to that here. The forms are also available on the IRS website. IRS.gov/choose a tax pro. There's a link to that here. Has additional information to help taxpayers including tips and choosing a preparer, the differences in credentials and qualifications, as well as how to submit a complaint regarding an unscrupulous tax return preparer. Start early, ask for phone or virtual help. It is advisable to start searching for a tax return preparer as soon as possible. This allows for more time to do research and get recommendations. Remember, tax preparers may pay any taxes due by April 15th, even if an extension is necessary. So in other words, you might be saying, hey, look, I can go on an extension on April, then I got till like October, no big deal. And that's fine. That's kind of true for the filing. However, if you owe taxes, then you still owe the taxes by the deadline. So there's two things you're talking about here. One, filing status, when you have to file the return in order to avoid penalties and interest. And two, paying. When did you pay? So if you're going to get a refund and you put it on extension, not a big deal to the IRS. They're probably happy about that because they don't have to pay you the refund until later. But if you owe them money, filing an extension does not stop them. The IRS is like, you owe us money, and we're going to charge you penalties and interest on it, even though you're on extension. So be sure to check with the tax return preparer to see if there are any restrictions or additions to the services they provide because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Some may offer phone or virtual assistance options in addition to their usual in-person services. Customers may be asked, for example, to mail documents to them or scan and email documents through a secure internet connection. Taxpayers can find answers to questions, forms, and instructions, easy-to-use tools online at irs.gov. They can use these resources to get help with it's needed at home, at work, or on the go. This news release is part of a series called the Tax Time Guide. There's a links to the Tax Time Guide here, a resource to help taxpayers file an accurate tax return. Additional help is available in Publication 17, Your Federal Income Tax Return for Individuals. There's a link to that here. There'll be a link to this in the description.